This is the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Jason. I am joined by my co-host, Lowell Francis. Hi, Lowell.
Hello. Good to hear from you.
And this is our monthly Gauntlet Hangouts Roundup episode. For this episode, we are joined by Michael X. Listeners, you might remember Michael from our 2017 Gauntlet Hangouts Roundup episode. Michael, welcome back to the Gauntlet Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
So, listeners, we are going to talk about some of the games we played in February, take a look at some of the stuff we're excited about on the Gauntlet Hangouts calendar in March, and then finish up with Giving Me Life. Let's dive right into it. Lowell, how was your February?
That's just pretty good. Off Gauntlet, I did 13th Age, Blades in the Dark, Godbound, Action Cards, Fellowship, and 7th Sea. And then in Gauntlet, we did, of course, continuing the Gauntlet Quarterly of Mutineer Zero. I got to do Guards of Abishan with my action card system, doing that online. Passiones de la Passions, and I'm so bad at pronouncing.
Passion de las Pasiones, yeah.
Thank you. It's close, reasonably close.
Pretty close.
And that was an interesting game. I loved that. But I also did Hearts of Wulin, the last game, and that is something I want to talk about today. Just a little bit about what it is and actually connect it up with Passion a little bit. So Hearts of Wulin is a Powered by the Apocalypse hack I did to try and simulate Wulin, Wushu, romantic melodrama. And it really takes inspiration a little bit from the Shaw Brothers films and things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Painted Skin, Bride with White Hair, those kinds of movies. But more importantly, it draws on these Wushu TV series from China and Hong Kong and actually all over Asia that are based on martial arts novels from the 50s, 60s, and 70s that were big. This sort of really large tradition of pulp fantasy sort of martial arts stories that these books are seminal to that sort of pop literature in China. A lot of these novels have been remade multiple times. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon actually comes from, one of these series. And I've watched a bunch of those shows, Proud Twins, Condor Heroes, Fox Volant of Snowy Mountain, and Smiling Proud Wanderer. They're all very interesting. Some of them are very political, and the shows are just magnificent.
Can I ask you a question real quick, Lowell?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for people who are maybe not super steeped in this genre, what would you say is the defining characteristic that makes this genre different from, say, Western fantasy?
So I would say that there is a sense of the character's position in a society is very strong, that there are these virtues that define and your relationship to the imperial authority and your position as part of this sort of outside the standard order, almost like the gunslinger, but a society that has a more kind of code of chivalry. Some of the translations actually translate these characters as knights and wandering knights, and that's a good way to look at it. And at least in the fiction that I'm really interested in, these are long soap opera, complicated novels filled with twisty turns and betrayals and conspiracies, and very much kind of focused on that thing and the personal interactions and such. There's very little magic.
Okay.
There's almost no magic in this. While the skills are what we would call supernatural, but they're just kind of taken as a thing in there. So we're not dealing with ghosts and spirits and Taoist magic or anything like that explicitly.
Got it. Awesome. Thanks.
So for this is in part, I just have to give a shout out to Renee Knipe, who I talked about this with her a couple of years ago, and she was very encouraging to me. And so I just hacked together some basic moves and 5 playbooks, and we went running with it. And the game went really well. It was fun, despite it being a cobbled together Frankenstein of different PBTA games. It felt right. I think I'd learned enough about PBTA to see how to get the dramatic bits I wanted to the table. A few changes I added, the idea that characters have a scale. That's something they talked about on Zhang Hu Hustle, meaning that when you go to fight somebody, you're either going to get beaten by them, or most of the time you're going to beat them. Sometimes you're on the same scale, and that's the only time we kind of actually roll to see what happens. Incentives like having XP for losing. So players might want to lose a conflict just to get more XP and have that dramatic tension of having to come back and learn. I borrowed from the Veil to do sort of abstract approaches, stats things, with the idea that when you take conditions, you actually shut down some of your stats. And that ended up working really well. It incentivized a lot of the play at the table. The fights are very simply resolved. Essentially, you get to describe how awesome you are. It's not a system it doesn't delve into individual blows. We resolve a fight with a single check. And even if you're fighting somebody that's going to beat you, you kind of get to roll to see how much you get to describe how you lose, which is kind of fun. But the most interesting thing for me is that having played with you in Monsterhearts, I brought some of those tools over to make this work. In particular, I did kinds of bonds and relationships like they have in most PBTA games, but I required that they are triangles.
Good move, yeah.
So any relationship you have has, like, I'm in love with this person, but there's this other person who's causing me problems. Or I have a rivalry with this person, but I love their sister. Everybody has to have a romantic entanglement and a couple of others. And those are really fun. Having the triangles there really allowed players to bring other PCs into these entanglements, and did a nice job with that. And then I borrowed from Monsterhearts so that if you got into an emotional test regarding your entanglements, like that stuff came to press on you, you had to make a test to see whether you could deal with it or whether you had to run away or take a condition. And that pushed the melodrama.
Yeah, I like that. The triangle thing is super interesting. I'm not super steeped in this genre. I have seen some wuxia movies, but the one that I think most of us have seen is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is essentially a relationship triangle, right? The whole movie.
Oh, yeah. All of those relationships are triangles and have those, one person versus one person, but then there's another thing pulling at them. And it wasn't something I mean, normally when I do relationships in games, it's usually a 1-to-1. So I hadn't thought of doing these triangles, and it was really cool.
Well, it's something that, that's something that's emphasized in Apocalypse World, even though there's no formal thing behind it. It talks about these player NPC player triangles. I mean, it's something that for me has always been a little bit tricky to push because, like I said, there's no formal mechanism for it. It's something that as a GM, you're just supposed to, do with the NPCs and the other tools at your disposal. But going in from the beginning and setting that up, I mean, sounds like it would be not just useful for this genre, but for, more broadly for PBTA games.
Well, one of the things that I love about the Monsterhearts classroom setup procedure, just to kind of piggyback off what you said there, Michael, is you have the players contribute a question for another player about an NPC, right? And then as the GM, if the first player hasn't sufficiently connected the three of them up, you can then step in and say, what about you though? Right? Like, how do you fit into this? Right. And so I think that just that process, if the GM at that point, I think the GM can really make sure that it happens, right? Like right in the beginning. So yeah, I think you're right. Mm-hmm. Whereas some other games just kind of allude to it, but don't give you a formal mechanism. And I think Monsterhearts is particularly smart about that, right? I think that whole setup process encourages it,
And I made the entanglements the primary driver of XP at the table. There's me taking a little bit from Dungeon World kind of flags. So that helped as well. But one of the most interesting things for me in the 3 sessions is because they're kind of really pushers of the drama and there's interesting stuff and we're building off of that, the players are hitting their entanglements and they're changing them. And a lot of times when you do relationship maps or things in PBTA games, you've got kind of a static thing and maybe it'll change later on. In the course of this, everybody had entanglements, change from session to session. They changed the nature of the relationship. They had to rewrite ones. And that was really cool because it was really strongly engaging with those. It drove a lot of interesting scenes, and the players were kind of surprised and I think pleased that they got all that stuff on the table.
Can I ask you a logistical question? How were you tracking all that? Just out of curiosity, what was your sort of physical way of doing it?
Yeah, so everybody had their entanglements, and at the start of the session, you said, you've got 3 entanglements. Which one do you want to highlight? And we would stop and talk about that. And, okay, I want to do this one because I like this character. And everybody would do that. And people would play off of each other. Okay, well, you highlighted that, so I'll highlight this. And then at the end of the session, all I did was I said, okay, did you interact significantly with your highlighted entanglement? If you did, then you get 3 XP. And then we check the other ones and you get 1 XP for interacting with it. It's just a simple end of session thing.
Nice. Good. Cool.
And it also allows some of that talking about what the play was at the end, which I think is good. And I loved Monsterhearts when we played it, but that's such a deep internal drama. Like very much people are in their own worlds and dealing with that.
It's super internal. Yeah, it's really internal.
Even in Passions, the characters are all together, but they are still about their own stuff. Wushu, this Hearts of Wulin thing was interesting because there's a lot of declarative stuff because they're heroes and they talk big and they say what they do, but then they also can't express their feelings. They can't say, thanks to this great tension between that. We get the high melodrama, and melodrama with a purpose. They're doing things. They're fighting about, who the bad guy is. They're trying to do, get these revenge things. But at the same time, they're dealing with these things that they can't quite express. And it felt really good at the table.
Nice.
Like I was super happy with it. And it also, people had enough space that Sherry kind of played a character who was kind of a rogue thief in, trying to investigate, a Robin Hood character, and was doing that kind of light thing. And Patrick had a deep, tragic story, and was leaning into that. And Maria was kind of doing the revenge hero, and all of that. People could do that, and it all still hung together.
Really nice. Good. Yeah. That's pretty awesome to hear. Was this the first time you playtested it, or?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even think about playtesting. I just wanted to play it. And I like it a lot. I think I'm going to do more with this. I've done some other stuff that I just kind of tried. No, that was fun. This was really satisfying and people liked it. So yeah. And had good players. That really helps. But I think I got, a decently strong setup.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really great. I'd be curious, this may not be the case in your game, but in a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games, I feel like there's usually like one basic move that is the sort of signature basic move of the game. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
But for example, Monsterhearts, it's turn someone on, right? It turns someone on and shut someone down, right? That duality. Mm-hmm. Did your game have something like that? Did it have like a sort of like the classic move? The move you would talk to Rich about on +1 Forward. What was that move?
The dueling stuff is interesting. Essentially the thing I stole from Monsterhearts about having to roll when you deal with the entanglements is interesting. One of the moves we only hit once, but I love how it's written. And that is when you go to duel a player character. And all the players are the same scale. All the PCs are the same scale. So if you want to have a conflict, either verbal or physical with another player, if you start that, you have to offer the other player what you're going to give them if they let you win. I will give you XP, or my character will make this change in themselves, or, there's a bunch of different stuff you can offer them. You can only make one offer. If the other PC goes yes, then they get to mark XP and they kind of lose. If they say no, then both of you have to mark a condition.
That sounds really good. Yeah, I like that.
When the one time we did it, I was like, oh yeah, that move worked like I wanted it to. I didn't know how it would work, but when it got to the table and it went, I was really happy with it.
It's awesome. Awesome. I'm going to just throw out there as a sort of not at all really related to this conversation thing, but that I want to say nevertheless, I love your entrenchedness into PBTA right now, Lowell, because you kind of like came you kind of came to the Gauntlet like without a lot of like PBTA like background, right?
That's true.
And I think it's pretty cool that like you're really like taking the core principles of the system, if we want to call it that, and doing awesome stuff with it. So
it's been great learning. I mean, good players who know how PBTA works and playing with good GMs who know how it works has taught me a lot, as well as the Plus One Forward podcast, which you can also find on the Gauntlet Network.
Gauntlet-RPG.com.
There we go.
That sounds really awesome. Yeah.
I'm going to run more of this. I think I'm actually going to take this to Games in Demand at Origins. I'm super pleased. And it makes me just want to run it again. So
awesome. Cool. Michael, how was your February?
Pretty good. I played in Lord Scurlock with Tyler. Just ran a couple sessions on Melandros that went really well. And I'm actually thinking about running more of those in the near future.
Oh, can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
We currently have a Melandros actual play, which you can find at Gauntlet-RPG.com. So.
And it's very good. It inspired me to run this when I watched the YouTube version of it back after GauntletCon. But yeah, it's a really cool system. And I mean, the session that you guys had with Tom was really great. And I was very, very satisfied with what we got out of ours. It was
cool.
Mostly about these guys on the docks and kind of them trying to get in on gang business, criminal business, and for the most part realizing that there's a lot of risks and costs involved in that. I also played I just played in last week one of the Mutant Year Zero sessions that Lowell's running, and I'm on books for another one next week.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on the good reminder for everybody listening: get on the wait list for different things because you will be able to get in on stuff. I got on the wait list for upwards of 10 Mutant Year Zero sessions, and I'm getting in on some sessions, and, you know, depending on how things go, could be in more next month. We'll see. But I've got a couple consecutive ones, which is really nice. And then I'm also, I've started running a little Dungeon World campaign with a few people at work.
Oh, interesting.
Kind of after hours. Yeah, and that's going really well so far. The session we wrapped up last week ended with the barbarian making a pact with a Fey Queen that she'll help kill the dragon that they're after, but there has to be a lot of destruction. Like, if this town isn't like half demolished by the time they're done, then no good, and there'll be hell to pay. But fortunately, the barbarian's more than willing to go along with destruction and bloodshed if it helps them kill this dragon.
Such a rookie mistake. You never make contracts or pacts with Fae.
No.
Right. I need to figure out like how I'm going to like find a catch in there somewhere, because it's like, no fun if we just follow through on it and everything works out.
Well, if you do that, just make sure you remember it, not like in Monsterhearts where everyone forgets that part of the game. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. The one I want to talk about most is the Scurlock campaign, the one I played the most sessions of with, that was one Tyler ran. And my first time playing Scurlock, my second one playing a game in that sort of Lady Blackbird family of games. The premise of this one is that Lord Scurlock has just died, and, his heirs sort of gather to squabble in the aftermath of his funeral. You have, his two sons, Eris and Tertius. I played Tertius, the long-lost pirate son. He also has the automaton Baston and Jedmund, the family butler, who's seen some shit in his time. And that was, it was really fun. I'd played one session of Lady Blackbird before, but this was my first time in an extended campaign. I think 4 sessions was really just the right amount. I adore the XP system in these games. The keys are so incredible. It's all based around the keys, but there's 3 different ways to get XP through them. One is you just hit the key, you do the thing, you get the XP. 2 is you get involved in another player's key, which is like the perfect sort. It's like you have both a drive and a flag in there, and it rewards players for, engaging with each other on the terms that they're most interested in. And, my favorite, you can resolve a key. Like, it points towards character growth. After for Tertius, for instance, I started with, he's the outcast. He's like, paranoid and doesn't really get along with the rest of the family. He's got Scurlock's dark history, and he's got the, his Lotus smoking habits. Well, after I'd smoked Lotus about 4 times, I was like, okay, I'm no longer interested in this. So, it's simple enough to, you'll have like a dramatic scene where you actually go ahead with that, but it's easy enough to move on with that and go on to something else. I mean, the character playing Eris, who's, kind of the haughtier brother, resolved one of his without even really intending to, which is to kind of give up his present, pretensions and get his hands dirty when he, kind of went overboard and killed a couple guys who had broken into the home. But, you see this natural evolution of the characters. It gives you a lot of freedom, especially with the packet of all of the different keys and moves that are involved in the system. A lot of freedom to take the characters basically where you want to take them. And it does like a really good job at rewarding players for, doing cool stuff with other people and growing their characters as well. So that's one thing that I really, really enjoyed about that system.
The keys super influential in the hobby, right? As a sort of design concept in role-playing games. I want to say that John Harper got that even from Clinton R. Nixon's The Shadow of Yesterday. I may be wrong about that, but Lowell, you might know better than I do, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
That's I think that's who he credits with that.
Yeah. I actually have a question. You mentioned, Michael, you talked about like how the play, you're kind of allowed to like kind of go wherever you want in the play. And I guess, and actually before I ask my question, I just want to point out that our Slackbot is intensely in love with Lady Blackbird as a game.
Yes.
And
Slackbot has a problem.
And if he's listening right now, he's having robot orgasms right now, like in real time.
Yes.
So my question though is, Lady Blackbird has a very linear sort of narrative, basically, right? I mean, you are going from station to station to try to get to the Pirate King, Uriah Flint, right? And you always start the same way. Is Lord Scurlock similar? I mean, does it have this like progression to it, or is it different?
So it's got a couple things going on, but it's not that kind of progression. There's not that end goal in place. I thought that like Tyler had like an extra couple of GM pages, which he didn't. I mean, he's very talented and the system gives you some good prompts, but I thought there was like a little bit more to it than what's on paper, which like actually a lot of it's just made up. It gives you a couple things to base things on. I mean, you have some information about Scurlock himself, some very basic information. You get the opportunity as a character to choose from some options they're most interested in as like what their character wants, what kind of secret knowledge their character has. And you have a list of like 10 NPCs. They're all people that Scurlock owes money, or owed money, that now you owe money, I guess. And like a 1-line description of them. And that's basically it. I mean, there's 2 kind of important matters to attend to. The first of which is clearing up Scurlock's debts, which is, there's stuff to do there, but it's relatively straightforward. There's also kind of this bigger problem that the characters have to solve, which is who is going to be Scurlock's heir. And the problem is you have 3 people that are qualified. Each of the 4 players has like a say in it, but you need a majority to agree on it basically, or you have to involve like Magister Holpine or find another way to scheme your way towards this position. To begin with, unless, 1 or more players are willing to either give something up or scheme their way around that somehow, you've created this sort of intractable player conflict that, until somebody relents or makes a deal, that's not really going to get solved. I mean, there's other loose ends as well. Some of them that have quite a bit, a lot to go on. I mean, there's the demon locked up in the basement, which is calling out to Scurlock's heirs. But there's a few different directions that you can, and you should be pulling the players in these different directions, but there's no like one overarching thing that the players are trying to do beyond the heir question. And that's one that like isn't really easily resolved.
Well, and I should probably say that even in Lady Blackbird, it's just a sort of heavily implied like narrative, I guess, like, or progression of things. You can, in fact, you can take the owl wherever you wish, right? And have whatever kinds of adventures you want, right? But
I think the thing that's really striking, especially in Lady Blackbird and a little bit in Scurlock, is how well written those keys are to generating those relationships. They're built very carefully, and that, as you say, once you solve them, there are a pool of other ones you can choose from, and they're equally interesting, equally cool drivers that you can pull in. Having played with keys for other games and things, that they're harder to write than you would think.
I agree, and I'm going to interrupt you real quickly just to say that we actually, Rich Rogers and I got permission from John to write a supplement for Lady Blackbird to put in Codex Love. I don't know if you guys remember that or not.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But what I loved about that supplement of Lady Blackbird is because these are like purposely like sort of very short form games, they don't have tons of GM support, right? There's just not a lot of GM support built into these documents, you know? And what I love about the piece that Rich wrote is because, for one thing, he's very familiar with the system. Like, not few people know Lady Blackbird like Rich does, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
him and Slackbot.
And Slackbot, exactly right. It's like Slackbot and Rich. That's it. But what I love about it is he actually like expands on some of those map locations. And what he does, to your point, Lowell, is he gives like sample like prompts and key possibilities tied to those locations, right? Yeah. Super helpful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then one last thing that I'll say about Lady Blackbird, but also Lord Scurlock, that kind of stuck out to me about it is that compared to other systems, especially PBTA, the characters are, at least mechanically, are super capable. Those like external, problems, those, any issues you have that, that aren't player conflicts that are posed against each other, you can basically do what you want to, which, to me really, really works out in the system because, you can go out and do stuff to get around the other players, to do these little, maneuvers and to kind of plot your way around them. But that stuff should be relatively easily resolved so you can kind of orchestrate that and get back to the real action, which is between the players. But it's a system where, if you want to do something, you've got the dice for it. I mean, your character's going to have things that they excel at, but, broadly between your stats and your dice pool, if you want to go out and do something, you can get it done, which I think works really well for it. But it makes it a very different dynamic from something PBTA, which is what I'm used to, where, anything that you do, there's likely going to be complications.
Right. Yeah. They definitely have a different feel.
I think that's right. It's more the sort of fate. What are you going to pay to succeed?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. I also want to say, boy, Tyler's good, isn't he?
Tyler's so good. Oh man.
So good. Go if you like watching actual plays, go watch some of Tyler's games.
Or Melandros that we just mentioned, which can be found, by the way, on Gauntlet-RPG.com. Tyler is the star of that, right? I mean, he is so freaking good. I mean, just like, so good.
It's fun to get like a really satisfying player villain in the mix, which, obviously it's hard to do in like an extended campaign, but like in a one shot like that, it works out really well. And Tyler just kills that role.
Awesome. Was there anything else you want to say about Lord Scurlock?
No, not in particular. I think we've got it all out there.
Cool. I'm glad you came on to talk about it because, we've been talking about Lady Blackbird for 100 years and I've owned Magister Lore and Lord Scurlock for almost as long, but we've never talked about them. So it's nice to talk about them now. So my February is, I never play nearly as many games as you guys do. I feel like I'm slipping. I don't know what's going on, but I played Monsterhearts 2. A continuation of the Mercy Falls 83 storyline. I got to play Dungeon World or run Dungeon World, kicked off a brand new campaign adjacent to We Hunt the Keepers called Songs of the Shadow Court. This particular series is called Vaults of Shadow. And then I got to run Cthulhu Dark Confidential, which I've run before. It is a trio of Cthulhu Dark mysteries that I wrote that are intended to explore different thematic concerns around old Hollywood. So I want to talk about Mercy Falls 83. Now, I've talked about Monsterhearts a million times on the show, so I'm not going to go into like mechanical things about Monsterhearts because the listeners will turn it off or listen to any number of other episodes. I do want to talk about, though, this series because in this series, there have been a number of like really unusual, distinct things about it that I can't say have, in some cases, have not really even like slotted into my normal role playing, and definitely not into Monsterhearts. And so here's what I'm thinking about. First thing, so 83 is, I've run 2 short series of it. Both were 3 sessions long. And in both cases, the first, a good portion of the first sessions were taken up by world setup and session 0 type stuff, right? And so in both cases, I had a very, very limited time frame to tell a story, right? Like we had a very short period of time to like develop the characters and actually do a story. And so what I've done in the 83 series, and I think this is a skill that is worth cultivating for other GMs out there. I'm very much into, GMing skill development is kind of like a theme of the Gauntlet this year. And what I did was I changed a lot of the basic assumptions about what a Monsterhearts game looks like in order to be able to tell a more fully developed story in a shorter period of time. And so instead of doing a full classroom setup, I changed it so that the characters were in these very significantly more narrow-framed situations. We still did a classroom setup, but they were just like more limited. So for example, in the first series of 83, they were a group of kids at Saturday detention, right? And so it was just the PCs and like 2 or 3 other NPCs. And we did the normal process where we asked questions about them and stuff, but it was this very, very like narrow focus situation where they're just at Saturday detention. It's not the whole full high school with all the characters and drama that portends, right? In the second series, I set it up so that they were just a group of kids working on the Yule Ball committee, the Yule Ball to come up with a theme and planning for the next Christmas ball, which they call Yule Ball on Mercy Falls. And I really love this approach because you still get that flavor of Monsterhearts of like doing the classroom setup and building those relationships out, but your cast of characters is not huge. And the setting itself feels a little bit more intimate and even isolated because there's not tons of students roaming around and teachers and stuff, right? Just that change really alters the pace of the game and it makes it a lot more like inward looking and a lot more intimate between the PCs. Works really, really great. And so as far as kind of going back to like this idea of skills development, I think that it's really good if you as the GM or the game facilitator, I suppose, depending on the game, if you can look at what you have to work with in terms of sessions and understand how to calibrate the game setup to get to that result, right? We've talked about this before, like running one-shots, like how that's kind of a fundamentally different thing, right, than running a regular game. Just something worth developing and just really thinking about. Ollie Jeffrey, he ran a one-shot of Monsterhearts for Gauntlet Con, just a one-shot. And I was skeptical because in my view, Monsterhearts is a game that wants a lot more sessions, right? But he did this really great thing. It was basically like a group of kids out in the woods and there's like this, and like a murder happens. Like that was it. That was the whole thing. It was like some murder out in this like camp resort thing or something. And he was able to get enough story out of it just doing that, I just love that. Like, Lowell, what do you think about that idea of like, I know you do this too, like how you calibrate the setup to make sure you can get something satisfying out of your limited amount of time?
Well, I think that's really important to know that you've got something really concrete for them to start at. I know Rich has done with Monsterhearts. He has that sort of 1980s Kmart thing that he's done.
Yes. Yeah. It's a good, I've always been in love with that. Yeah.
a great evocative setting, a narrow space to work in, a few NPCs to interact with, and some goals. And I think that's a great way to try it. Especially, here's the thing is, it's especially good if the players are really aware. If you say, okay, we are doing a one shot, this is how we're going to work it, push yourselves to get the scenes you want in that.
Yeah, for sure. So I said I wanted to talk about 3 things. The second thing I want to talk about is a little more dubious. And I'm not even entirely sure I'm talking about this right now as something anyone should emulate who's listening. But Monsterhearts Mercy Falls 83 is premised entirely on a lie. A lie to the players specifically. Okay, so I told the players before and during the session 0 that we were doing a Breakfast Club themed series. They were all going to be there. It was going to be kind of like about angst and teen romance and kids who don't fit in with each other, different social classes and all that kind of stuff. I sold it that way, right? And they were all into it. They were ready for it. But it wasn't, and I knew that. It, in fact, was a 1983 teen slasher flick setup. And I essentially kind of gradually interrupted their little angsty teen drama thing with this serial killer situation, right? The spiral killer who wears a stag skull mask inspired by Philip's character on the main series of Mercy Falls. And I loved it. I believe the players loved it too, because it was essentially a bait and switch designed to get a reaction out of the players, right? And I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think the players trusted me. Like if I thought the players didn't know me or didn't trust me, I would never have done this. Mm-hmm. But I did it, and I kind of like how it turned out. I mean, they still managed to get their story that they were going for, but it was like with this like backdrop that kind of happened. And honestly, I think it's kind of impossible to do Monsterhearts in a pure 80s teen drama mode just because of all the different moves and stuff that push things a certain way. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing that happened. It's something I've never done before. And I'm not even saying go do it. I'm just, I'm just suggesting that it worked out for us.
And it's the thing is I think you're still sort of doing the thing you promised. What I've seen people do badly is where the bait and switch is, hey, you don't get any of what we told you were going to get. I think you're swerving. You're not completely pulling the rug out from under them.
Yeah, it was a build-up. I mean, it was definitely a gradual build-up. And when the horror stuff started happening, the players were like genuinely like freaked out, right? I mean, I got what I wanted out of it in terms of like trying to elicit a certain emotional reaction from the players. And you're right. Like the fact of the matter is the moves. That was another thing that was in the back of my mind. I promised a certain thing that I know for a fact that Monsterhearts can't actually provide, right? Monsterhearts cannot. It has to do supernatural stuff. It has to do scary stuff, right? The playbook moves just don't allow anything else unless you have like a really, really particular curated set of skins. I'm not sure how you could get to a pure sort of like Breakfast Club experience. So that was also part of it in the back of my mind. I was like, well, I'm promising a thing that I know it can't do on purpose, right? So
you can't have a Breakfast Club. There will be a serial killer.
That's the obvious, like, logical conclusion.
Oh my gosh!
So how long did it take, like, the players to like kind of like realize that you were pushing it, that you weren't just like hinting at another direction, that you were like really pushing it in a different direction? And did they at that point like go along with that or keep pushing in a Breakfast Club direction, or how did that kind of cross go?
It started to really happen around 2/3 of the way into the first proper session. After we did the session 0 stuff and then we had a full session, it was about 2/3 of the way in. And I was kind of like snowballing and projecting, or hinting at the badness as moves were happening, right? But nevertheless, just kind of letting them do their thing. And as they were there trapped in Saturday detention in different ways, they began figuring out that murders were happening in the town, right? The coach who was there monitoring Saturday detention had to leave all of a sudden, and they didn't know why initially, but they started to like piece together like what had happened. And in fact, his daughter was one of the victims. And then eventually the killer showed up to Saturday detention, right? That was kind of how it went. And, it's super interesting. I mean, the series didn't stay there completely. I mean, they resolved the whole serial killer situation in the first 83 series. And the second one, we've made reference to it, but it's not like a major plot point.
Right.
But, and so I guess I know the players had a good time. I know they were getting their personal stories that they wanted to get, but it was just this idea of like, we're not actually getting a Breakfast Club situation, right? It wasn't like straight down the line that. The other thing I want to talk about is more of a player-oriented thing. So in the last series, the one that we just wrapped, Garrett is playing a character named Julia, a worm named Julia, which is this sort of dragon skin in Monsterhearts from the second skins set that Jackson Tegu put together. And a thing happened that I've never seen in a game, but I kind of loved it. It worked really great. Essentially, as an act of revenge, another PC lured Julia out into the forest and trapped her in this coffin-sized box in the forest that's kind of like submerged in the ground, the kind of storage thing that like deer hunters or rangers would like have out there for like ready supplies, like while they're out in the woods, you know? Traps her in this box, and she spent fully half a session in a box. And we got to see how she was processing that. She got to interact with a couple of like really antagonistic NPCs who knew she was in there. It was really intense and interesting. I mean, and Garrett played it so well, this like sense of like isolation and terror, right?
Garrett loves those kinds of opportunities. He really does. And he goes with them.
He does indeed. And it was good. And he loved it. I mean, he loved it. He said it was unlike anything he'd ever done too. So it wasn't just like, oh, this character's off having their own story. This character is trapped and cannot leave, right? And what made it extra delicious is she was kind of a villainous character, and so she kind of had it coming, right? Like in some ways, like there are a lot of people in the setting who were like really happy to see her get her comeuppance, right? And so it had that kind of feeling too. It was great. And again, another one of those situations where I think that kind of depends on a lot of trust at the table, right? But if you've got that trust, you can do stuff like that for sure. But Mercy Falls 83 is going great. I don't think I have anything else to say about it. It's delightful in its way, in its ghoulish way. Oh, I do have one more thing to say about it. The brand new pocket-sized play, which, by the way, can be found on Gauntlet-RPG.com, is the first of those 83 games. You will be able to hear me in real time lie to the group about what the game is going to be about, lying to the listeners as well. So there you go.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go take a look at March. Okie doke. Let's look at the Gauntlet Hangouts calendar on March. Talk about some of the games that look pretty exciting on there. Lowell, what are you looking at right now?
Man, so Maria Rivera has started to run more for the Gauntlet. She ran for Gauntlet Con. She and I share some certain love for certain kinds of games like Godbound, things like that. And she's running Urban Shadows, the Forsaken Metropolis, filled, and a wait list that's bigger than the base list. And she's doing this in this city that kind of everyone's forgotten. And, you know, Urban Shadows is a hot ticket item. Maria's a great GM. It's a cool off-kilter premise. She's letting people do the playbooks from the expansion stuff. So it's really cool to see that on the table in March.
Awesome. Michael, what are you looking at right now?
So I'm really excited for Monsterhearts. It's one of my favorite systems, and I've run a little bit of it, but haven't had a whole lot of chance to play it. So I'm really excited to get in on your series of that next month.
Oh, mine, yeah,
yeah.
It's like someone else is running Monsterhearts. Awesome.
No, your series. But other people should run Monsterhearts. If other people run Monsterhearts, I'll sign up for their sessions as well if I can make it. And you'll certainly have people signing up for it no matter what, because it's another hot ticket kind of game
high
right
demand,
now.
Yep.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to pull out of – there was a couple sessions I was really looking forward to that I'm going to have to pull out of Space Wurm versus Moonicorn.
Oh.
Tyler's running that in March, so – keep an eye out for an open space. I guess by the time this airs, it'll probably have filled up. But
yeah,
I've wanted to play that for so long. And I love playing games with Tyler, so I'm kind of bummed about that one. But it is what it is. Another reminder to everybody to get on that wait list, because it very often gets you into games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I'm taking a look at all of our OSR stuff on the calendar right now. I think the OSR stuff kind of flies under our radar a little bit sometimes. And we've got several GMs who are really keeping the OSR flame lit. Michael Barford, Horst, running things. Richard Ruane is running sessions of Into the Odd, which is OSR game by, I think, Chris McDowell. I think I have that right.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Which has got like a really sort of like strange, weird fantasy premise to it. I've played it a couple times and I've always enjoyed it. So I'm pretty excited about that. Richard's actually running For Into the Odd, he's running Wreck of the Void Hatred, which was his entry into our Gauntlet Con contest. You might remember reading that one.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that.
It was a good one. Yeah. It was I think it was a finalist. I'm pretty sure. Maybe. I can't recall. But in any case, and I think it's going to be in Codex too. I think it comes out in Codex as well in March, I believe. So yeah, he's going to be doing that. So that's pretty awesome. And with that, let's go to Giving Me Life. Hello. I have two very important things to share with you. The first, after a long wait, Codex back issues are now available on DriveThruRPG, so if you joined our Patreon late and missed some of the earlier issues, you can now round out your collection. The second, the newest issue of Codex, Codex Cold, is available in our Patreon feed through March 2018. Here's what you'll find inside. Firelight, an original powered by the Apocalypse game and Game Chef 2017 finalist. The Wreck of the Void Hatred, a chilling OSR scenario. Balier, which I may not be pronouncing correctly, but is in any case a rural town in Ireland for Monsterhearts 2. Our newest Gauntlet Daddy, Cold Cock. 5 dozen unusual things about the body we just found, a number of original illustrations, and a custom layout by Ollie Jeffrey. To get Codex Cold, just make a $4 or higher pledge on the Gauntlet Patreon by March 31st. That's at patreon.com/Gauntlet. And do check DriveThruRPG for the Codex back issues. Thank you. It's Giving Me Life. Lol, it's Giving You Life.
So Monster Hunter World came out for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox, whatever Xbox is up to. And it is a game that I shouldn't like because I don't play like Dark Souls games. I'm not good at Twitch things. But this game is super fun, got all these different weapons, the environments are great, there's all about collecting and building things, and Sherry is playing it, which means that we have to split time on that, but then my niece and nephew are playing it, and you can play in groups. I don't know why I like it so much, but it is an absolute pleasure, and I recommend. There are a bunch of people on the Gauntlet who played it. Of course, they've all played like the other ones, and they know what they're doing.
Yeah, David Lafreniere is really hooked on it.
Oh, yeah. And he sounds like he's good. I am not. So I have to swing a lot and run. And I'm digging it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it seems like this one's a real big breakthrough for them. I haven't played any of the titles before, but I might have to pick this one up. I've heard it's a real good entry point.
Yeah. And here's the thing is, let me tell you about this. I have to say one more thing. You have a companion with you. It's called a palico.
The little cat guy.
It's a cat.
Yeah.
Who you get to dress the cat in different armor. Yeah. And there's a sequence where there's the meowscular chef who fixes food for you. And every time you go to eat, there's this sequence of him preparing food, and it never stops being funny. Never.
Awesome. Michael, what's Giving You Life?
So this long weekend, I have to give a shout out to Civ 6 Rise and Fall. Civilization 6 just released an expansion. That's probably the game series, as far as video games go, that I poured more hours to than anything. So I've been enjoying kind of checking out the new mechanics. There's a loyalty system where you can actually lose cities, which is actually very exciting to me, where they can just say, look, we're going to like rebel against you and no longer be part of your deal. It really helps with like one of the things that I've had an issue with in the games, that they tend to be pretty static. Once you get to like a certain point, like past like the first third of the game, there isn't a whole lot of change, not a whole lot of dynamics on the board, but this one seems to shake that up a bit.
Oh, very cool.
But I've been enjoying that quite a bit so far.
Awesome. Cool.
Awesome.
My notes for Giving Me Life say, OMG The Bachelor. So Lauren McManaman, who is the editor of Codex and who's an active member of the community, she is presently writing a Final Girl hack for a Bachelor type TV show, right? It's coming out in Codex Love 2, which comes out in April, I believe. For more information about Codex, go to Gauntlet-RPG.com. she's super hooked on reality TV shows, okay? And I like reality TV shows too, to an extent. I watch Drag Race, but that's kind of it, right? For the most part. But she's writing this game and she's like, oh my God, you have to watch The Bachelor. You would love The Bachelor. And she watches the Aussie one, but I have access to the American one here because, we recorded over here. And so, but I never watched it. I am hooked on The Bachelor. Holy fuck. Like it is garbage television. There is almost nothing redeemable about it in terms of it being like an artistic endeavor, but it is so compelling. It will make you believe in love again. Especially when that bitch Crystal gets kicked off. It will. It's kind of an awful show in some ways because I feel like just the existence of the show is setting women back like 100 years because like the women just, I just want to scream at them. I'm like, oh my God, you've known this guy for 10 minutes. You can't possibly be this emotionally invested in him. But they are. And I'm led to believe it's the same way on The Bachelorette too. So it's fair play, right? In that regard. The Bachelorette is where they have a bunch of men who are trying to, marry this woman. But it's so compelling. It's very compelling. Like you get wrapped up in it.
It's reality. It's reality TV. They're not going to be like, yeah, this guy seems okay.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. I know to some, you can tell that some of the prospective, women or wives or whatever, you can tell that many of them are just there for the publicity, right? Like Crystal, who, she's awful. She's a total villain on the show, right? But so compelling, great TV. Like, oh God, like I would watch her on every season of The Bachelor, right? Even though she's evil and destroys the concept of love. she is a blight on the idea of love. But so it's just super compelling. You get really wrapped up in the drama, and the Bachelor himself, he's a really cute guy, so that's a cool thing too. So yeah. Anyway,
I'm surprised there aren't any tabletop systems out there for it already. It seems like it'd be such a fun mix. I'm excited to see the final girl hack because it's such a good system.
She's been playtesting it on Gauntlet Hangouts, or kind of like in the sort of back channel version of Gauntlet Hangouts that Fraser uses a lot too for his stuff. And apparently it's going really well. And listeners, that's our show. If you'd like to get in touch with us, I highly recommend going to gauntlet-rpg.com, where you'll be able to find all kinds of interesting information about the Gauntlet. We're also on G+. Just go to the community section of G+, and search for the Gauntlet. We're on Twitter at GauntletRPG. The Twitter is lit. And we're also on Patreon at patreon.com/Gauntlet. Lowell, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Michael, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Yeah, definitely.
And listeners, thanks for checking us out. Take care.